Hey night traveler, welcome to the Stealth Podcast. Here, you'll hear chilling stories to help you drift to sleep or keep you awake. Before we start, drop a comment telling me what time you're tuning in and where you're listening from. Now, kill the lights, put your headphones on, and let's hit the road. My name is Derek Holloway. I'm 42 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been doing the van life thing for about 3 years now, documenting abandoned places across the West for my YouTube channel. My van, a beat-up 2008 Ford Transit I called Rusty, had taken me to some pretty creepy spots, but nothing compared to what I was about to experience in Nevada. I'd heard about Silver Peak from another van lifer I met at a rest stop in Utah. He told me about this abandoned mining town deep in the Nevada desert. Said the locals in the nearest town, about 40 miles away, refused to talk about it. That's exactly the kind of place I was looking for. The disturbing legends surrounding it made it perfect content. I packed up, checked my camera batteries, and headed south. The drive through Nevada was brutal. August heat turned my van into an oven, and the AC had given up somewhere around Reno. I passed through a small town called Coleridge to stock up on supplies. The gas station attendant, an older woman named Martha with sun-damaged skin and suspicious eyes, went quiet when I mentioned Silver Peak. "You don't want to go there," she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "People who go looking for that place, sometimes they don't come back the same." I laughed it off, thinking she was just playing into the local scary folklore for tourists. She grabbed my wrist as I turned to leave, her grip surprisingly strong. "I'm serious, son. The mine shafts aren't stable, and there's things out there that..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Just be careful." I thanked her and left, but her warning stuck with me more than I wanted to admit. The road to Silver Peak wasn't on any map. I had to use GPS coordinates from an old mining forum, following a deteriorating dirt road that seemed to lead nowhere. Sagebrush scraped against Rusty's sides as I bounced over ruts and rocks. The landscape was hostile, nothing but endless desert, jagged mountains in the distance, and that relentless sun beating down. After 2 hours of rough driving, I finally saw it. Silver Peak rose from the desert like a skeleton, weathered wooden structures leaning at impossible angles, rusted metal equipment scattered everywhere like the bones of prehistoric creatures. The town was bigger than I expected, maybe 30 or 40 buildings stretched along what used to be the main street. A massive mine entrance gaped open on the hillside above the town, dark and foreboding. The whole place had this oppressive feel to it, like the air itself was heavier here. I pulled Rusty up near an old general store and killed the engine. The silence hit me immediately. In the desert, you expect some sound, wind, birds, insects, but Silver Peak was dead quiet. It was disturbing how complete the silence was, like the place existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. I grabbed my camera and started filming, narrating as I walked through the main street. This is Silver Peak, folks. Abandoned since 1952 after a mine collapse killed 37 workers. Local legends say the miners' spirits never left. I panned across the dilapidated buildings, capturing the horror of decay. Most structures were missing walls or roofs, their contents scattered and ruined by decades of exposure. I found old newspapers from 1951, rusted tools, even a child's toy, a disturbing reminder that families once lived here. The general store still had products on the shelves, covered in dust so thick it looked like gray snow. I picked up a can of beans, the label barely readable, and nearly dropped it when I saw something written in the dust on the shelf. "Leave." I told myself it was probably from another explorer, maybe years ago, but my hands were shaking as I set the can down. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting everything in orange and red, colors that made the town look even more sinister. I decided to set up camp in the old hotel on the edge of town. It had most of its roof intact and seemed structurally sound enough. I parked Rusty right outside, close enough that I could get to it quickly if needed. Inside the hotel, the lobby was frozen in time. A reception desk with an old register book sat covered in dust, and I couldn't resist opening it. The last entry was dated March 15th, 1952. Johnson family, room 7. Checking out tomorrow. They never got the chance. The mine collapsed on March 16th. I climbed the creaking stairs to the second floor, choosing room 3 because the door was still solid and the window gave me a clear view of my van and the street below. As darkness fell, I made dinner on my camp stove. Just instant ramen, nothing fancy. I sat on the floor of room 3, eating and reviewing the footage I'd shot. That's when I noticed something weird in one of the clips. I'd filmed the mine entrance from the street, and in the background, just barely visible in the darkness of the tunnel, there was a shape. It looked like a person standing just inside the entrance, watching me. I rewound and watched it again, my appetite vanishing. The figure was definitely there, humanoid but somehow wrong. Too tall, or maybe the proportions were off. I tried to convince myself it was just shadows playing tricks, pareidolia, my brain finding patterns where none existed. But then I heard it, a sound from somewhere below, in the hotel. Metal scraping against wood, slow and deliberate. Someone, or something, was in the building with me. The scary part wasn't the sound itself, but the fact that I knew I'd been alone. I'd checked every room, every corner. There was no one else here when I arrived. I grabbed my flashlight and stood frozen in that hotel room, listening. The scraping sound came again, closer this time, like something heavy being dragged across the floorboards downstairs. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct told me to bolt for the van, but I also knew that running blindly in the dark through an unstable building was a good way to break my neck. I crept to the doorway and shined my light down the hallway. Empty. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and open doorways, but nothing moved. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. Not the quick steps of someone exploring, but the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just camping here for the night. Didn't mean to intrude on your spot." Silence. The footsteps stopped. I waited, barely breathing, my light aimed at the stairwell. Nothing. Just that oppressive, disturbing silence. I decided to check it out. Stupid, I know, but the alternative was cowering in that room all night wondering what was down there. I moved down the hallway, floorboards creaking under my weight, each sound making me wince. When I reached the stairs, I shined my light down into the lobby. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The dust-covered reception desk, the old register, my camp stove still on the floor. But something felt different. The air was colder, and there was a smell I hadn't noticed before. Metallic, like copper or old blood. I descended slowly, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. Halfway down, my light caught something on the wall. Scratches. Deep gouges in the wood, fresh ones that definitely weren't there before. They ran from floor to ceiling, for parallel lines like claw marks. My hands started shaking again, making the light beam dance crazily across the walls. I reached the lobby and did a full sweep with my flashlight. Nothing seemed out of place, but then I noticed the register book was open to a different page. I'd left it on the last entry from 1952, but now it showed an earlier date, October 1951. One entry caught my eye. Foreman Davies, room 12, reported strange noises from the mine. Miners refusing to work the deep shaft. Below that, someone had written in different handwriting. 3 men disappeared last night. Found their equipment at the 900-foot level. No bodies. Something down there. I flipped through more pages, finding similar entries. Disappearances, strange sounds, miners quitting without explanation. The last few pages before the final entry were filled with a single phrase written over and over in shaky handwriting. "IT comes up at night, it comes up at night, it comes up at night." My mouth went dry. Whatever scared these miners back in the 50s, whatever caused them to write that, it might still be here. A crash from outside made me jump. I ran to the window and saw one of the old wooden structures across the street collapse, sending up a cloud of dust. But that's not what made my blood run cold. Standing in the middle of the street, illuminated by moonlight, was a figure. The same one I'd seen in my footage near the mine entrance, except now I could see it clearly. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and thin, impossibly thin, like someone had stretched a human body on a rack. Its skin was gray and leathery, covered in what looked like coal dust or dried blood. But the worst part was its face. It had features, eyes, a mouth, but they were wrong, distorted, like someone had sculpted a face from memory and gotten all the proportions slightly off. It stood perfectly still, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, staring directly at the hotel. Directly at me. I stumbled back from the window, my flashlight clattering to the floor. This wasn't some local trying to scare off trespassers. This was something else entirely, something that shouldn't exist. I snatched up my flashlight and my camera gear, moving as quietly as I could toward the back of the hotel. There had to be a rear exit, some way to get to my van without going through the front. The hotel was a maze of rooms and hallways, and in my panic, I got turned around. I found myself in what looked like an old dining room, tables still set with dishes coated in decades of grime. The windows here faced the side of the building, giving me a view of the hillside and that massive mine entrance. My light caught something moving up there, multiple figures now, all with that same elongated, wrong appearance, emerging from the mine shaft. They moved in a disturbing way, not quite walking, more like gliding across the ground. One of them let out a sound that made my skin crawl, a high-pitched screech that echoed across the empty town, almost metallic, like grinding gears mixed with a human scream. The others answered, creating a chorus of horrible noises that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I finally found a back door, the wood so rotted it practically fell off its hinges when I pushed it. I stepped out into an alley between the hotel and another building, my van visible about 50 feet away. The creatures, I couldn't think of them as anything else, were spreading through the town, searching. I could hear them moving between buildings, that scraping sound I'd heard earlier now making terrible sense. They were dragging something, or maybe it was just the sound of their bodies moving across the old wood and metal. I had maybe seconds to make a decision. Run for the van and hope I could start it before they reached me, or hide and wait them out. But wait them out until when? Dawn. What if daylight didn't matter to these things? What if Martha at the gas station was right, and people who came here really didn't leave the same? I took a deep breath, gripped my flashlight like a weapon, and prepared to run. Then I saw one of them round the corner of the building ahead, blocking my path to Rusty. Its head swiveled toward me with a sickening crack, and it opened its mouth impossibly wide, revealing rows of teeth that looked like rusted nails. I threw myself back through the door and slammed it shut, knowing it wouldn't hold but needing something, anything, between me and that thing. My mind was racing through options, none of them good. The hotel was a death trap, multiple entry points, unstable floors, too many places for those creatures to corner me. But outside meant facing them in the open, and there were too many of them now. I could hear their screeching getting closer, communicating in that awful metallic language. I sprinted back through the dining room toward the main lobby, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My flashlight beam swept across an old fireplace, and I grabbed a rusty iron poker leaning against it. It wasn't much, but holding it made me feel slightly less helpless. That's when I remembered something Martha had said, something about the mine shafts not being stable. Maybe that was the key. Maybe these things lived in the mine, and if I could collapse an entrance or create enough noise, enough chaos, I might have a chance. The front door of the hotel exploded inward, with splintering as one of the creatures forced its way through. Up close, it was even more horrifying than I'd thought. Its eyes were milky white, blind-looking, but it tracked my movement perfectly. Its chest didn't rise and fall, it wasn't breathing. Dried blood or something darker stained its torso, and I could see old mining equipment embedded in its flesh like it had been fused there. A pickaxe blade protruded from its shoulder, a length of chain wrapped around one arm. These things were the miners, or what was left of them. Whatever happened in that mine in 1952 had transformed them into something monstrous, and they'd been here ever since, waiting in the darkness. The creature lunged at me with surprising speed, and I swung the poker, connecting with its head. The impact sent vibrations up my arm, and the thing stumbled back, screeching. But it didn't go down, didn't even seem particularly hurt. I ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, the creature right behind me. Its elongated fingers scraped against the railing, that horrible scraping sound filling my ears. I reached the second floor and ducked into the nearest room, room 7, where the Johnson family had stayed their last night. I slammed the door and looked around desperately. The window, it faced the back of the building, and there was an old awning below, maybe 8 feet down. If I could make that jump, I might be able to get around to my van. The door shuddered as the creature hit it, wood cracking. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed my backpack with my essentials, left everything else, and smashed the window with the poker. Glass rained down onto the awning below. The door burst open just as I climbed onto the windowsill. The creature reached for me with those impossibly long arms, fingers brushing my jacket. I jumped. I hit the awning hard, the old canvas tearing under my weight, but slowing my fall enough that I landed in a roll on the ground. Pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me moving. I could hear more of those things coming around the building, drawn by the noise. My van was 30 feet away, keys in my pocket, but I'd never make it in a straight line. I limped toward a pile of old mining equipment, rusted carts and rails, and scrambled behind it, trying to catch my breath and think. The creatures were spreading out, searching, their screeches filling the night air. There had to be at least a dozen of them now, maybe more. How many miners died in that collapse? 37, the report said. Were they all here, all transformed into these nightmare things? I watched them moving through the town, and I noticed something. They avoided the moonlight, staying in the shadows wherever possible. Not completely. They could move through lit areas, but they preferred darkness. It was a small observation, but it might be useful. My ankle was swelling badly, and I knew I couldn't run far on it. I needed a different plan. That's when I saw the dynamite. In one of the mining carts near me, partially buried under debris, were 3 sticks of old dynamite with frayed fuses. Incredibly dangerous, probably unstable as hell, but also maybe my only chance. I'd done a video on abandoned mines before and learned that old dynamite could become even more volatile over time, the nitroglycerin sweating out of the sticks. These were at least 70 years old. If I could get them to the mine entrance, create a collapse, maybe I could trap these things inside, or at least create enough chaos to get to my van. It was a terrible plan, but it was all I had. I carefully picked up the dynamite, handling it like it might explode just from looking at it wrong, and stuffed it in my backpack. I'd need something to light the fuses. My lighter was in my van, in the center console. Of course it was. One of the creatures was close now, maybe 20 feet away, its head turning back and forth like it was sniffing the air. Could they smell me? Track body heat. I had no idea what senses they used. I picked up a chunk of broken concrete and threw it as hard as I could toward the far side of the town. It clattered against a metal roof, and immediately 3 of the creatures moved toward the sound. The one near me hesitated, then followed the others. I took my chance and hobbled toward my van, trying to move quietly despite my injured ankle. Every step felt like it took forever, and I kept expecting to feel those cold fingers grabbing me from behind. I reached Rusty and fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them. They hit the ground with a jingle that sounded deafening in the quiet. I snatched them up and unlocked the door, sliding into the driver's seat. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing hard, relatively safe behind locked doors and metal. But I could see them converging on my position now, drawn by the sound. I had maybe a minute before they surrounded the van completely. I grabbed my lighter from the console and shoved it in my pocket, then made a decision that was probably going to get me killed. I couldn't just drive away. The road out was narrow and rough, and if these things could run as fast as they seemed to move, they'd catch up before I made it a mile. Plus, something about leaving them here, letting them continue existing, felt wrong. Those miners deserved rest, not this nightmare existence. I had to try to end this. I started the engine, and the sound brought them running. They swarmed toward my van from all directions, their screeches rising in pitch. I threw Rusty into gear and floored it, aiming straight for the mine entrance on the hillside. The van bounced over rocks and debris, my injured ankle screaming every time I worked the pedals. Creatures threw themselves at the sides of the van, clawing at the metal, their fingers leaving deep gouges in the paint. One climbed onto the hood, its face pressed against the windshield, mouth open in that horrible silent scream. I could see straight down its throat, nothing but darkness, like looking into a well. I hit the brakes, and the creature flew forward, tumbling off the hood. I gunned it again, weaving between the old structures, trying to shake the others off. One clung to the roof, and I could hear it tearing at the metal, trying to peel my van open like a can of sardines. I swerved hard to the right, scraping against the side of a building, and the impact knocked it loose. It fell, but immediately got back up and rejoined the chase. These things didn't feel pain, didn't tire, didn't stop. They were relentless. I reached the base of the hill and started driving up the slope, the van's engine straining. The mine entrance loomed ahead, that massive dark mouth that had started all of this back in 1952. I could see old warning signs: danger, unstable ground, and no trespassing, all faded and bullet-riddled. The creatures were right behind me, running up the hill with that unnatural gliding movement. Some of them were coming out of the mine itself, like I'd driven straight into their nest. I stopped about 50 feet from the entrance and killed the engine, grabbing my backpack with the dynamite. This was it. I kicked open the door and stumbled out, my ankle nearly giving out. The creatures formed a semicircle around me, cutting off any escape route back down the hill. They didn't rush forward, though. They just stood there, watching with those milky eyes, swaying slightly like they were waiting for something. Or maybe they knew I was trapped. I backed toward the mine entrance, keeping my eyes on them, the backpack clutched to my chest. "I don't know if you can understand me," I said, my voice cracking. "But I'm sorry. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry you've been stuck here for 70 years. One of them, maybe the foreman, based on the remnants of better clothing, tilted its head and made a sound that was almost like speech, grinding and broken. It raised one arm and pointed at the mine behind me, then at itself, then at me. It was trying to tell me something. I glanced back at the mine entrance and saw why they'd stopped advancing. The ground around the entrance was different, fresher dirt, like something had been digging. And there were bones. Human bones. Recent ones based on the scraps of modern clothing still attached. These weren't the only people who'd come to Silver Peak. The creatures had been luring explorers here, probably for years, and whatever happened to those people? I didn't want to think about it. The foreman creature moved closer, and I saw something in its eyes that made me hesitate. Not hunger or malice, but something else. Desperation? Pleading? It reached out one clawed hand and touched its own chest, right where a human heart would be, then pointed at the mine again. It wanted me to go inside. Every horror movie instinct I had screamed at me not to, but I realized something disturbing. These things weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to show me something. They'd been hurting me toward the mine from the beginning. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped into the entrance, the creatures following at a distance. The temperature dropped immediately, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. The mine shaft sloped downward, shored up with ancient timbers that looked ready to collapse. Old rail tracks ran down the center, disappearing into darkness. My light caught something on the walls, more writing, carved deep into the rock. "IT took US. We can't die. Help US." The words repeated over and over, getting more frantic as I descended. I passed mining equipment, lunch pails with names written on them, a boot with a foot still inside. The shaft opened into a larger chamber, and what I saw there made my stomach turn. Bodies, dozens of them, in various stages of transformation. Some were almost fully changed into those creatures, their skin gray and leathery, their limbs elongated. Others were fresher, recent victims who'd come looking for adventure and found something far worse. They were all still alive, sort of twitching and moaning in the darkness. And at the center of the chamber was the source. Something massive and ancient squatted in the middle of the cavern, partially embedded in the rock like it had grown there. It was hard to look at directly. My eyes kept sliding off it, my brain refusing to process what it was seeing. But I got impressions, too many limbs, a body that pulsed with a sickly bioluminescence, appendages that reached out and touched the half-transformed victims, keeping them alive, keeping them changing. This thing had been here long before the miners arrived. They'd dug too deep, broken into its chamber, and it had infected them somehow. The mine collapse in 1952 wasn't an accident. The miners had tried to seal it in, bury it forever. But it hadn't worked. The thing was still here, still alive, still transforming anyone who came near. The foreman creature appeared beside me, and this time when it touched its chest and pointed, I understood. It wasn't pointing at the mine. It was pointing at the dynamite in my backpack. They wanted me to finish what the original miners had started. They wanted me to bury this thing for good, even if it meant burying them too. I pulled out the dynamite sticks with shaking hands, staring at the thing in the center of the chamber. It seemed to sense what I was planning because those appendages started moving faster, reaching toward me. The half-transformed victims began writhing more violently, their moans growing louder, and I realized they were trying to warn me. One of them, a woman who looked like she'd been here maybe a few weeks based on her clothing, managed to form words through her distorted mouth. "Run still, spreads," she gasped. The creature wasn't just in this chamber. It had extended itself throughout the mine, probably through the whole mountain. Collapsing this one section might not be enough, but it was all I could do. I placed the dynamite near the main support timbers, the ones holding up this entire section of the mine. The fuses were old and unpredictable, maybe 30 seconds if I was lucky. The foreman creature watched me work, and when I finished, it did something that broke my heart. It knelt down, like it was praying, and the other creatures did the same. They knew this was the end, and they were ready for it. I pulled out my lighter, my thumb on the wheel, but I hesitated. If I lit these fuses and ran, would I make it out before the explosion? The mine entrance was at least 300 feet back up that shaft, and my ankle was destroyed. I'd be running uphill on unstable ground in the dark with maybe 30 seconds head start. The math wasn't good. One of the creatures, it looked like it had been a young man once, maybe 20 years old, moved closer and placed its clawed hand on my shoulder. The touch was gentle, almost human. It pointed at me, then at the exit, then made a pushing motion. Go. It was telling me to go. The others started moving, positioning themselves between me and the central creature, which was now thrashing violently, its appendages whipping through the air. They were going to buy me time, hold that thing back while I ran. I'd come here looking for scary content for my channel, looking for thrills, and instead I'd found people who'd been suffering for 70 years, waiting for someone to end their nightmare. I flicked the lighter and held the flame to the fuses. They caught immediately, sparking and hissing. "I'm sorry," I said again, and then I ran. Behind me, I heard the creatures attacking the central mass, their screeches mixing with a sound that was worse, a deep, resonating howl that seemed to come from the earth itself. The thing was fighting back, and I could hear bodies hitting the walls, the crack of breaking bones. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My ankle gave out twice on the way up the shaft, and each time I forced myself back up, scrambling on hands and knees when I had to. The fuses were burning faster than I'd expected. I could smell the sulfur, hear the sizzle getting closer to the dynamite. I was maybe halfway to the entrance when the first explosion hit. The shockwave knocked me flat, and the entire mine shuddered. Rocks rained down from the ceiling, and one of the support timbers snapped with a sound like a gunshot. I covered my head as debris pelted me, then pushed myself up and kept moving. The second explosion was bigger, deeper in the mine, probably from pockets of old mining gas igniting. The shaft began collapsing behind me, a wave of destruction chasing me toward the surface. Dust filled the air so thick I could barely see, could barely breathe. My flashlight had fallen somewhere back in the chaos, and I was running blind through choking darkness, following the slight upward slope and praying I was going the right direction. I could feel the mountain coming down, thousands of tons of rock and earth settling, crushing everything below. The creatures, that ancient thing, all of it being buried under the weight of the mountain. The howling stopped abruptly, cut off mid-scream, and somehow that was more disturbing than the sound itself. Then there was only the rumble of the collapse and my own gasping breaths as I clawed my way toward what I hoped was freedom. I saw moonlight ahead, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and threw myself forward with the last of my strength. I emerged from the mine entrance just as the final explosion ripped through the mountain. The blast threw me down the hillside, tumbling over rocks and brush until I slammed into the side of my van. The mine entrance collapsed completely, massive boulders sealing it shut, and then the ground where the entrance had been simply fell away, creating a crater maybe 50 feet across. The entire hill had partially caved in on itself, and I could hear structures in the town below collapsing as the shockwave spread. I lay there for a long time, too exhausted and hurt to move, watching dust settle over Silver Peak like snow. When I finally managed to pull myself into my van, the eastern sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was coming. I started the engine. Somehow Rusty still worked despite everything, and began the painful drive back down to the road. Every bump sent agony through my ankle, and my entire body felt like one giant bruise, but I was alive. I was getting out. The drive back to Coleridge took twice as long as it should have. I kept having to stop, fighting waves of nausea and dizziness. When I finally pulled into the gas station, Martha was there, opening up for the morning shift. She took one look at me, covered in dust and blood, barely able to stand, and her expression told me she'd seen this before. Other survivors, other people who'd gone to Silver Peak and somehow made it back. "You buried it," she said, and it wasn't a question. I nodded. "Good. Maybe it'll stay buried this time." She helped me inside, gave me water, called for an ambulance. While we waited, She told me the real history of Silver Peak. The miners in 1952 hadn't been the first. The mine had been abandoned and reopened 3 times before that, always ending in disaster. The thing in the mountain was old, older than the town, maybe older than anything. Each generation thought they'd sealed it away for good, and each time it found a way back. How do you know it's really gone? I asked. Martha looked out the window toward the desert, toward where Silver Peak lay hidden in the wasteland. I don't, she admitted. But maybe you bought us another 70 years. That's something. My name is Patricia Vega. I'm 53 years old, and I live in Sacramento, California. After my divorce finalized last spring, I bought myself a used Sprinter van and spent 2 months converting it into a tiny home on wheels. My kids thought I was having a midlife crisis, but honestly, I just needed to get away from everything. The house that felt too empty, the city that reminded me of 26 years of marriage that ended with a text message. I'd been on the road for 4 months now, mostly sticking to campgrounds and RV parks, playing it safe. But I was getting bored with safe. I wanted to feel something again, even if it was just the thrill of parking somewhere I wasn't supposed to. That's why, when I saw the sign for the old Route 50 rest area outside of Austin, Nevada, I decided to ignore the closed, no services warning and pull in anyway. The rest area looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The main building, probably bathrooms and vending machines once, was boarded up, graffiti covering every surface. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds pushing through the asphalt. There were maybe 6 parking spaces under a rusted metal awning that looked ready to collapse. It was perfect, isolated, free, and nobody would bother me here. I pulled into a spot at the far end, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, taking in the silence. The desert stretched out in every direction, nothing but sagebrush and mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and lonely, just like I felt. I made myself dinner, pasta with Jared sauce, nothing fancy, and settled in to read. That's when I noticed the other van. It was parked at the opposite end of the lot, under the awning. I could have sworn it wasn't there when I pulled in, but maybe I'd been too focused on finding a good spot to notice. It was an older model, white with rust spots, windows tinted dark. No lights on inside that I could see, no movement. Probably just another vanlifer like me, seeking free camping. I thought about walking over to say hello. Vanlifers were usually friendly, always ready to trade stories and tips, but something stopped me. The way the van was positioned, angled slightly toward mine, felt deliberate, like whoever was inside wanted to watch my van without being obvious about it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the divorce had made me suspicious of everyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I closed my curtains and tried to focus on my book, but I kept glancing toward where I knew that van was parking. Around 10 p.m., I heard an engine start. I peeked through a gap in my curtains and saw the white van pulling out of its spot. Relief washed over me. They were leaving, and I'd have the rest area to myself. The van drove slowly across the parking lot, and for a moment I thought it was heading for the exit. But then it stopped, right next to my van, so close I could have reached out and touched it if my window was open. My heart started racing. This wasn't normal. This wasn't friendly vanlifer behavior. The white van's engine idled for maybe 30 seconds, and I could feel someone looking at my van, studying it. Then, without warning, it backed up and parked in the spot directly behind mine, blocking me in. I was trapped. If I tried to leave, I'd have to either squeeze past them or back up into the weeds and risk getting stuck. The engine cut off, and everything went silent again. I sat frozen in my bed, phone in hand, trying to decide if I was overreacting. Maybe they didn't realize they'd blocked me. Maybe they'd move in the morning. I must have dozed off around midnight, exhausted from driving all day. I woke up to tapping. Soft, rhythmic tapping on the side of my van. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, listening. It moved from the side to the back door. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was walking around my van, knocking gently, testing. I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. I was in the middle of nowhere. The tapping moved to the other side, right by my head. Tap, tap, tap. So close I could hear fingernails scratching against the metal. Hello, a voice called out, muffled by the van's walls. Male, older, with a strange sing-song quality. I know you're in there. Saw your lights earlier. Just wanted to make sure you're okay. It's not safe out here alone." The way he said "not safe" made my skin crawl. This wasn't concern. This was a threat dressed up as neighborly worry. I didn't respond, didn't move, praying he'd think I was asleep or not home. The tapping stopped, and I heard footsteps crunching on gravel, moving away. I waited, counting to 100, then carefully peeked through my curtains. The white van side door was open, and I could see inside. Barely, just shadows and shapes. There were multiple people in there. At least 3, maybe more, all sitting perfectly still in the darkness, facing my van. Watching. One of them raised a hand and waved slowly, like they knew I was looking. That's when I realized this wasn't random. This wasn't some weird coincidence. They'd been waiting here, in this abandoned rest area, waiting for someone like me to pull in. Someone alone, someone vulnerable, someone stupid enough to ignore the closed signs. I grabbed my keys with shaking hands and made a decision. I had to get out of here, even if it meant ramming their van or tearing up my undercarriage driving through the desert. Staying here until morning wasn't an option. Whatever these people wanted, I wasn't going to stick around to find out. I climbed into the driver's seat as quietly as possible, but the moment I touched the ignition, every door on the white van opened at once, and figures started climbing out. I turned the key and my engine roared to life, flooding the parking lot with my headlights. There were 5 of them, 4 men and 1 woman, all standing between me and the exit. They didn't run toward me or shout. They just stood there in a line, blocking the way out, their faces blank and expressionless in my headlights. The man in the center, the one who'd been tapping on my van, was tall and gaunt with a long beard. He raised both hands like he was trying to calm a spooked animal. "No need to panic," he called out. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk." Everything about this screamed danger. Normal people don't trap someone in a parking lot at midnight and claim they just want to talk. I threw my van into reverse, planning to back up and find another way out. But when I looked in my mirror, I saw 2 more figures standing behind me. 7 total. They'd surrounded me while I was sleeping. I laid on the horn, hoping the noise might scare them off or attract attention, but we were miles from anywhere. The sound just echoed across the empty desert and died. The tall man started walking toward my driver's side window, still with his hands up in that fake peaceful gesture. "Patricia," he said, and my blood went cold. How did he know my name? Patricia Vega from Sacramento. Divorced. 2 kids, Marcus and Elena. You've been on the road for 4 months now, running from your problems. He was right next to my window now, his face inches from the glass. His eyes were strange, too wide, and he didn't seem to blink. "We've been watching you. We watch all of them. All the lost souls who come through here looking for something they can't name." I wanted to scream, to drive straight through them, but I was paralyzed by fear and the horrible realization that this had been planned. They'd researched me somehow, knew who I was before I even arrived. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out. The man smiled, revealing teeth that were filed to points. "We want you to understand something. This desert takes things. Takes people. Takes their stories. Every year, dozens of van lifers disappear out here, break down in the wrong place, get lost on a back road, camp somewhere they shouldn't. Most of them are never found. Do you know why?" He leaned closer, his breath fogging my window. "Because there are people like us who make sure they're never found. We're cleaners, Patricia. We clean up the loose ends, the people nobody will miss." The woman in the group laughed, a high-pitched, disturbing sound. "Your kids think you're having a breakdown," she called out. "They tell their friends their mom went crazy and ran away. If you disappeared tomorrow, how hard would they really look?" It was like they'd reached into my worst fears and pulled them out into the light. I couldn't think straight, couldn't plan. Every survival instinct was screaming at me to move, do something, but my body wouldn't respond. Then I remembered the CB radio I'd installed last month. I'd barely used it, but it was there, mounted on my dashboard. If I could reach it, broadcast a distress call, maybe someone would hear. A trucker, highway patrol, anyone. My hand crept toward the radio while the tall man kept talking, telling me about the other van lifers they'd processed, describing what they did to them in horrifying detail. He was enjoying this, drawing it out. My fingers found the CB, and I clicked it on, keeping the volume low. "Mayday, mayday," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "Route 50 rest area, east of Austin. Multiple hostiles. Please, anyone." The tall man's head snapped up, and his expression changed from smug satisfaction to rage. "She's got a radio," he shouted. "Get her out now." They surged toward my van, and I didn't think anymore, just acted. I slammed the gear into drive and floored it straight at them. The tall man dove to the side, but I clipped one of the others, felt the sickening thud of impact. My van crashed through their human barrier and headed for the exit. Behind me, I could hear them running for their white van, shouting. I hit the main highway doing 60, my van rattling and shaking. The road was empty, no other cars, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. I checked my mirror and saw headlights behind me. They were following. The white van was older but clearly modified, because it was gaining on me fast. My Sprinter could barely hit 70, and they were doing at least 80. This highway was narrow and winding, carved through rocky terrain, and one wrong move would send me over the edge. But I had no choice except to keep my foot on the gas and pray. They pulled up beside me, swerving into my lane, trying to force me off the road. I cut the wheel right, then left, fighting to stay on the asphalt. The woman was driving. I could see her through their passenger window. Grinning like this was the most fun she'd had in years. The tall man was leaning out the sliding door with something in his hands. A gun? No, worse, a road spike strip, the kind police used to blow out tires. If they got in front of me and deployed that, I was done. I spotted a dirt road coming up on my right, barely visible in the darkness. It probably led nowhere, deeper into the desert, but it was a chance to shake them. At the last possible second, I cranked the wheel and took the turn, my van tilting dangerously. The white van shot past, their brake lights flaring as they realized I'd turned. By the time they reversed and followed, I had maybe a 30-second lead. The dirt road was rough, full of potholes and rocks, my van bouncing so hard I bit my tongue and tasted blood. But I kept going, driving into the unknown, because behind me was certain death. The dirt road twisted through the desert like a snake, and I had no idea where it led. My headlights bounced wildly as I hit ruts and rocks, illuminating sagebrush and the occasional Joshua tree. Behind me, the white van's headlights were getting closer again. They knew this terrain better than I did, could navigate it faster. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel so hard, and sweat poured down my face despite the cool desert night. The road forked ahead, and I had to make a split-second decision. Left looked like it curved back toward the highway. Right disappeared into darker territory, heading toward what looked like hills or maybe old mine tailings. I went right, praying it wasn't a dead end. The white van followed without hesitation, and I realized with growing horror that they were hurting me somewhere specific. This wasn't a chase, it was a hunt, and they knew exactly where they wanted me to go. After another mile of brutal driving, the road opened into a wide clearing. And that's when I saw it, an old compound of some kind, maybe a mining operation or abandoned military site. There were several buildings, all dark and crumbling, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had mostly fallen down. Rusted equipment was scattered everywhere like giant metal bones. I'd driven straight into their territory, exactly where they wanted me. I slammed on the brakes, my van skidding to a stop in a cloud of dust. The white van stopped about 50 feet behind me, blocking my only escape route. For a moment, everything was still. Then all 7 of them climbed out, spreading into a semicircle, taking their time now that they had me cornered. The tall man walked forward, that same unsettling smile on his face. "Welcome to the pit," he said, gesturing at the buildings around us. This used to be a processing facility for a tungsten mine, closed in 1989 after some accidents. Now it's our place. Our workshop. Workshop. The word made my stomach turn. I looked at the buildings more carefully and noticed things I'd missed in my panic. Bloodstains on the concrete, scratch marks on the walls, a pile of what looked like clothing and personal items dumped near one structure. This was where they brought their victims. This was where people died. "You're going to kill me," I said, and my voice sounded surprisingly steady despite the terror coursing through me. The woman laughed again. "Eventually. But first, we're going to have some fun. See, it gets boring out here in the desert. We need entertainment. And you van lifers, you're perfect. No real ties, no schedules, nobody expecting you anywhere specific. You can disappear for weeks before anyone even thinks to look." She pulled out a knife, testing the edge with her thumb. "We usually make it last 3 or 4 days. Longer if we really like someone." The tall man shot her an annoyed look. "Don't scare her too much yet. It's better when they have hope at first." I had to think. My van was my only real protection, but I couldn't stay in it forever. They'd break in eventually, or wait me out. They had supplies in their van, probably food and water. I had maybe a day's worth, and my phone still had no service. The CB radio was my only connection to the outside world, but I had no idea if anyone had heard my distress call. I could be on my own out here. Then I remembered something from my research when I first started van living. Information about Nevada's backcountry. This area was popular with off-roaders and dirt bikers during the day. There was a chance, slim but real, that someone might come through in the morning. I just had to survive until dawn, maybe 6 hours from now. 6 hours trapped in my van while these psychopaths circled outside. The tall man approached my driver's side window again, tapping on it with one long finger. "Come on out, Patricia. We can do this easy or hard. Your choice." I didn't respond, just reached back and grabbed the tire iron I kept behind my seat. It wasn't much of a weapon against 7 people, but it was something. The tall man sighed dramatically. "Hard way, then. Bring the tools." 2 of the men went to the white van and returned with a toolbox and what looked like a car jack. They were going to break into my van mechanically, probably pry open a door or smash a window. I had minutes, maybe, before they breached my only shelter. I scanned the compound desperately, looking for any advantage, any possible escape. That's when I noticed the main building had lights on inside. Not bright lights, just a faint glow coming from what might have been the basement level. Someone else was here, or something else. The group hadn't reacted to the lights at all, like they were expected. The woman saw me staring and smiled. "Oh, you noticed Marcus?" "Yeah, he's always here. Marcus runs the place, you could say. He's very excited to meet you." Marcus. They'd used my son's name, and now they were saying it again like it was a joke. Was this all some sick game to them, using people's personal information to torment them? Or was there really someone named Marcus here, someone who ran this nightmare operation? The 2 men with tools started working on my passenger door, trying to jam the car jack between the door and frame to create leverage. Metal screeched against metal, and I knew I had maybe 2 minutes before they popped it open. I made a decision. Staying in the van was death, just slower. At least if I ran, I had a chance. I shifted into reverse, yanked the wheel hard, and hit the gas. My van shot backward, straight at the white van. The cultists scattered, shouting, as I smashed into their vehicle. The impact jolted through my entire body, and my airbag deployed, but I'd accomplished what I wanted. I'd created a gap in their circle. I shoved the deflating airbag aside, threw open my door, and ran. I sprinted toward the main building, the one with lights, because it was the only structure that might have something useful inside. A weapon, a phone, another exit. Behind me, I could hear them chasing, their footsteps pounding on the dirt. The tall man was yelling, "Don't let her reach Marcus. He'll ruin everything." That confirmed it. There was someone else here, and for some reason, they didn't want me to find him. I crashed through the building's front door, it wasn't even locked, and found myself in what looked like an old processing facility. Conveyor belts, industrial equipment, everything covered in dust and decay. The light was coming from a stairwell at the back, leading down. I ran for it, taking the stairs 2 at a time, descending into what had to be basement level. The air got cooler and damper, and I could hear machinery humming. Someone was definitely down here, operating equipment. I reached the bottom and stopped dead. The basement had been converted into living quarters, a bed, a kitchen area, shelves full of supplies. And sitting at a desk with multiple computer monitors was a man, maybe 30 years old, staring at screens showing security camera feeds. Feeds from all over the compound, including several showing the group of cultists searching for me. The man at the monitors spun around in his chair, and his eyes went wide when he saw me. "Jesus Christ, you actually made it inside," he said, standing up quickly. He was thin, pale like he didn't see much sun, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans. They usually catch people before they get this far. You must have really pissed them off. I raised the tire iron defensively, not sure if he was friend or enemy. "Who are you? Are you with them?" He shook his head, holding up his hands. "Hell no. I'm Marcus Chun. I've been trapped down here for 3 years. 3 years. The words didn't make sense at first. "What do you mean trapped? Why haven't you left?" He pointed at one of the monitors, showing the cultists spreading out through the building above us. "Because of them. They caught me when I was rock climbing out here, brought me to this compound. But I'm a programmer, and I told them I could set up security systems, hack into police databases, help them track potential victims. So instead of killing me, they made me their IT guy. He moved to a different monitor, pulling up what looked like social media profiles. This is how they find people like you. I monitor van life groups, forums, Instagram accounts. When someone posts about traveling alone through Nevada, I flag them. The group sets up along their route and waits. The horror of it hit me like a physical blow. You've been helping them murder people for 3 years? Marcus's face twisted with anguish. I didn't have a choice. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd go after my family in San Francisco. They showed me pictures of my parents' house, my sister's apartment. I had to do what they wanted. He pulled up another screen showing files, hundreds of them, each one labeled with a name and date. These are all their victims. I've documented everything, kept records, hoping someday I could get this information to the police. But I can't leave, and I have no outside communication. They cut the internet connection except when I need it for research, and they monitor everything. I could hear the cultists upstairs now, their footsteps moving through the building, searching. There's a back door, Marcus said quickly, pointing to a heavy metal door at the far end of the basement. It leads to the old mine tunnels. They don't like going in there. Part of the tunnel system collapsed years ago, and they're afraid it's unstable. If you can make it through, there's an exit about half a mile and that comes out on the other side of the hill. From there, you can reach the highway. It sounded like a terrible plan, wandering through unstable mine tunnels in the dark, but it was better than facing the cultists. Come with me, I said. We can both get out. Marcus shook his head, looking miserable. I can't. They'll know I helped you escape. They'll go after my family. I grabbed his arm. If I make it out, I'll bring back help. Police, FBI, whoever. But I need you to tell me. Who are these people? Why are they doing this? Marcus pulled up a file on his computer, showing old newspaper clippings. They call themselves the Desert Disciples. Started in the 80s as some kind of doomsday cult. Their leader was a guy named Thomas Brennan. He's the tall one with the beard. He believed that civilization was going to collapse, and only those who embraced violence and chaos would survive. Most of the original members died or left, but these 7 stuck around. They've been living out here for decades, killing people for practice. They think they're preparing for some apocalypse that never came. He clicked through photos showing the group over the years, their faces barely aging, always the same 7 people. The woman's name is Rachel. She was a nurse before she joined. The others are Mark, David, Sarah, James, and Paul, all former professionals who gave up normal life for this. They're smart, organized, and completely insane. The footsteps were getting closer. Someone was coming down the stairs. Marcus grabbed my shoulders and pushed me toward the mine entrance. Go now? I'll stall them. Tell them you went a different direction. He pressed something into my hand, a small flashlight. Stay to the left at every fork in the tunnel. The right paths have cave-ins. And Patricia? I turned back. There are things in those tunnels. Old things. The cultists aren't the only scary thing about this place. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard Thomas's voice from the stairwell. Marcus, is she down there? I didn't wait to hear more. I yanked open the heavy door and plunged into the mine tunnel, pulling it shut behind me. The darkness was immediate and absolute, broken only by my small flashlight beam. The air was cool and smelled like minerals and decay. The tunnel was roughly hewn from rock, supported by old wooden beams that looked ready to collapse. I could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. I started walking, trying to move quietly despite my racing heart. Behind me, I heard the door burst open and Thomas shouting at Marcus. Where did she go? I moved faster, the tunnel branching ahead, just like Marcus said. I took the left path, trying to remember his instructions. Stay left at every fork, half a mile to the exit. I could do this. The flashlight beam was weak, barely illuminating 10 feet ahead, and I had no idea how much battery life it had left. I passed old mining equipment, rusted carts, broken tools, a hard hat with a lamp that no longer worked. The tunnel curved and descended slightly, going deeper into the mountain. That's when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps or voices, but something else. A scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across rock. It was coming from ahead of me, from deeper in the mine. Marcus's warning echoed in my mind. There are things in those tunnels. Old things. I stopped walking, listening. The scraping stopped too, like whatever was making the sound was also listening for me. Then came a different noise, breathing. Deep, rattling breaths that echoed off the tunnel walls. It wasn't human. Couldn't be human. No person breathed like that, with that wet, labored sound. I stood frozen in that tunnel, trapped between the cultists behind me and whatever was breathing in the darkness ahead. The scraping sound started again, closer now, and I saw a movement at the edge of my flashlight beam. Something large and pale, hunched over, moving on all fours but wrong. The proportions were all off, limbs too long, body twisted in ways that made my eyes hurt to process. It lifted what might have been a head, and I caught a glimpse of a face that was almost human but stretched and distorted. Marcus had said old things lived in these tunnels, and now I understood. This place had claimed victims long before the desert disciples showed up. I backed away slowly, trying not to make sudden movements, and the creature tracked me with eyes that reflected my flashlight like an animal's. Then I heard Thomas's voice echoing through the tunnel behind me. "Patricia, there's nowhere to go. Those tunnels are a maze, and you'll die down here." He was right about the maze part. I could see multiple branches ahead, dark openings leading in different directions. The creature made a sound, somewhere between a growl and a moan, and started moving toward me faster. I had seconds to decide, face the creature or run back toward the cultists. Neither option was good, but at least the cultists were human, something I could potentially fight or reason with. This thing in the tunnel was pure nightmare. I turned and ran back the way I'd come, and behind me I heard the creature give chase, its movements creating horrible scraping echoes. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran, showing glimpses of tunnel walls rushing past. I rounded the curve and nearly collided with Thomas and two other cultists. They had flashlights too, brighter than mine, and when they saw what was chasing me, their expressions changed from triumph to fear. "Shit, it's awake," one of them said. "We need to get out of here now." Thomas grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Move." Everyone back to the basement. We ran together, predator and prey temporarily united against something worse. The creature was fast, faster than any of us, and it was gaining. I could hear its breathing getting closer, could smell something awful like rotting meat and stagnant water. We burst through the metal door back into Marcus's basement, and Thomas slammed it shut, throwing the heavy bolt. Something hit the door from the other side with tremendous force, denting the metal. The door shuddered with repeated impacts as the creature tried to break through. Marcus was still at his computer, and he looked up with an expression of grim satisfaction. "I told you there were things in there. That's why we don't use the tunnels anymore. Something's been living in the deep sections for years, probably decades. It's killed 3 of our people who tried to explore." Rachel, the former nurse, was breathing hard, her face pale. "That's why we have the rule, never open that door. Never go into the mines." She glared at Thomas. "You broke the rule." Thomas released my arm and stepped back, and I saw the group dynamics shift. They were scared of that creature, genuinely terrified in a way they hadn't been when hunting me. I seized the moment of confusion. While they were focused on the door and arguing amongst themselves, I grabbed one of the monitors from Marcus's desk. It was heavy, old-school CRT, and swung it at the nearest cultist. The screen shattered against his head, and he went down hard. Before the others could react, I ran for the stairwell. Rachel tried to grab me, but I kicked her in the knee and she collapsed. I heard Thomas shouting behind me as I took the stairs 3 at a time, my lungs burning. I emerged into the main level of the building and sprinted for the front door. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was coming. I'd made it through the night somehow. My van was trashed, the front end crumpled from hitting their vehicle, airbag deployed. But their white van looked worse. I'd hit it hard enough to damage the radiator, fluid pooling underneath. Neither vehicle was going anywhere. I ran into the desert, heading for the dirt road we'd come in on, hoping to reach the highway before they caught up. The desert was coming alive with morning sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing. I'd never been so happy to hear normal sounds in my life. My ankle was screaming, I had cuts and bruises everywhere, and my lungs felt like they were on fire, but I kept running. Behind me, I heard shouts as the cultists emerged from the building. They were chasing again, but I had a head start. The dirt road was rough, and I stumbled several times, but I pushed myself to keep going. Then I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, an engine. A vehicle was coming up the road toward me. A Jeep with 2 people inside, probably off-roaders coming to explore the area. I ran toward them, waving my arms frantically. The Jeep stopped, and a man in his 30s leaned out. "Hey, are you okay? You look..." "Call 911, I gasped out. "There are people trying to kill me." "And call the FBI. There's a programmer trapped in that compound with evidence of dozens of murders." The man pulled out his phone, and his companion, a woman with hiking gear, came around to support me. "We heard a distress call on the CB last night," she said. "We were in the area and thought we'd check it out at first light. Are those the people?" She pointed past me, and I turned to see the cultists stopped about 100 yards away, watching. They knew it was over. With witnesses and the police coming, they couldn't maintain their cover anymore. Thomas raised a hand in what might have been a wave or a salute, then turned and walked back toward the compound with the others following. The woman helped me into the back of the Jeep while her companion stayed on the phone with emergency services. "Highway patrol is on the way," he said. "ETA 15 minutes. I collapsed against the seat, shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "There's a man down there," I said. "Marcus Chun. He's been their prisoner for 3 years. And there's something else in the mine tunnels, something that isn't human. You need to tell them to be careful." When the police arrived, 3 cars, sirens wailing, they found the compound abandoned. The cultists had disappeared into the desert, leaving behind their damaged van and all of Marcus's equipment. But Marcus was gone too, along with his computers. The police think he ran with the cultists, that he was complicit all along. But I don't believe that. I think he took his evidence and ran while he had the chance, probably trying to reach his family before the disciples could get to them. They found the bodies, though. 17 of them, buried in shallow graves around the compound. 17 van lifers who disappeared over the past 5 years, their cases unsolved until now. The FBI launched a massive manhunt for the desert disciples, but as of today, 3 months later, they haven't found them. They're still out there somewhere in the Nevada desert, waiting for their next victim. And sometimes, late at night when I'm trying to sleep in my apartment in Sacramento, I gave up van living permanently. I wonder about that thing in the mine. What it was, how long it had been there, and whether it's still hungry. My name is Vincent Calabrese. I'm 37 years old, and I live in Boston, Massachusetts. I'd been a freelance photographer for about 12 years, specializing in automotive and lifestyle content. When my biggest client, a luxury car magazine, went under last winter, I decided to pivot into something different. Travel photography, specifically the van life scene. I bought a 2015 Ram ProMaster, converted it myself over 3 months, and hit the road with a plan to document America's hidden corners. My girlfriend thought I was running away from our problems, and maybe she was right, but I needed this. Needed to feel like I was creating something meaningful again. I'd been on the road for 2 months when I saw the ad on a van life forum, looking for a photographer to document experimental art installation in remote Nevada location. $2,000 for 3 days work, meals and camping included. It seemed perfect, good money, interesting content, and a chance to add something unique to my portfolio. The contact was a woman named Diane Mercer, who said she was part of an artist collective working on a project about isolation in the American West. She sent me coordinates to a location about 60 miles northwest of Tonopah, deep in the middle of absolutely nowhere. "We're creating an immersive experience," she wrote in her email. "Think Burning Man meets performance art meets social experiment. Your job will be to capture the raw, unfiltered moments." The whole thing was a bit vague, but the money was real. She sent a deposit of $500 to my PayPal before I even left California. I figured worst case scenario, I'd get some weird art photos and a good story. Best case, I'd have portfolio material that would set me apart from every other travel photographer. I stocked up on supplies in Tonopah, water, food, gas, and headed out on a dirt road that wasn't on any map. The woman at the gas station asked where I was going, and when I showed her the coordinates, she just shook her head and said, "Nothing out that way but ghosts and bad decisions." The drive took 3 hours on roads that got progressively worse. I passed through landscape that looked like Mars, red rock formations, dried lake beds, mountains that seemed to shimmer in the heat. My van's suspension groaned over every washboard section and pothole. I was starting to think I'd made a huge mistake when I finally saw it, a cluster of structures in the distance, arranged in a perfect circle. As I got closer, I could see they weren't buildings exactly, more like art installations. Tall metal sculptures, fabric structures that billowed in the wind, and at the center, a large geodesic dome made of mirrors that reflected the desert sky. There were maybe 6 vehicles parked around the perimeter: vans, trucks, one old school bus painted in psychedelic colors. I pulled up next to a vintage Airstream and killed my engine. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the wind howling across the flats. Then a woman emerged from the dome, waving. She was probably in her 50s, with long gray hair and wearing flowing clothes that looked expensive despite the desert dust. "Vincent, you made it." Diane had a warm smile and a firm handshake. We were starting to worry. The roads out here can be tricky. She gave me a quick tour of the camp. There were 12 people total, all artists or performers of various types. A sculptor named Raj who was building something from car parts and animal bones. A dancer called Luna who practiced movements that looked almost ritualistic. 2 musicians, brothers named Carl and Daniel, who played instruments I didn't recognize. Everyone seemed friendly enough, if a bit eccentric. "We're exploring themes of transformation," Diane explained as we walked. "How isolation changes people, breaks down their normal social masks. For the next 3 days, we'll be engaging in various exercises and performances. Your job is to document everything without interfering. Think of yourself as invisible." She showed me where I could park my van and set up, then handed me a schedule printed on expensive paper. The activities started at sunset: group meditation, something called truth circles, and a midnight performance she called the revealing. I spent the afternoon getting familiar with the space and testing different camera angles. The light out here was incredible, harsh and dramatic, perfect for the kind of moody, atmospheric shots that would look great on Instagram. But something felt off. The art installations, when I looked at them closely, were disturbing. One sculpture was made entirely of doll heads arranged in a spiral pattern, their glass eyes catching the sun. Another was a wooden frame with dozens of mirrors positioned to create infinite reflections. When I stood in front of it, I saw myself repeated endlessly, each reflection slightly distorted. The fabric structures had symbols painted on them, geometric patterns that hurt my eyes if I stared too long. And everywhere, there were cameras, hidden ones, mounted in the sculptures and structures. I counted at least 20 before I stopped looking. Diane noticed me examining one. "We're documenting too," she said. "Multiple perspectives, multiple truths. That's what this project is about." As the sun started to set, the group gathered in the center near the mirrored dome. They sat in a circle on cushions, and Diane invited me to observe from outside. "Remember, you're the witness, not a participant," she said. The meditation started normally enough, breathing exercises, some chanting. But then Diane began asking questions. Personal questions. "What are you running from?" she asked each person in turn. "What truth are you hiding from yourself?" And people answered, really answered, confessing things that seemed way too intimate for a group of strangers. One woman talked about abandoning her children. A man described embezzling money from his employer. Luna the dancer admitted to burning down her ex-boyfriend's house. It was like watching a therapy session crossed with a confession booth, everyone competing to reveal their darkest secrets. I kept shooting, capturing their faces in the dying light, and something in my gut told me this wasn't art. This was something else entirely. When Diane's eyes met mine through my camera lens, she smiled, and I realized with creeping horror that the real subject of this project wasn't isolation or transformation. It was me. The truth circle went on for hours, each confession getting darker and more disturbing than the last. Carl, one of the musicians, talked about planning his father's murder before the old man died naturally. Raj described torturing animals as a teenager. These weren't vague artistic admissions. They were detailed, specific, and delivered with an eerie calmness that made my skin crawl. I kept taking photos because that was my job, but my hands were shaking. When the circle finally ended around 10 p.m., Diane stood and stretched like nothing unusual had happened. "Beautiful work, everyone. Such honesty, such vulnerability. Let's break for dinner. Then we'll prepare for the midnight performance." The group dispersed, heading to their vehicles or the communal kitchen areas someone had set up near the dome. I started packing up my gear, planning to grab some food and retreat to my van, but Diane appeared beside me. "Getting some amazing shots?" she asked. Her voice was friendly, but her eyes were calculating, studying my reaction. "Yeah, really powerful stuff," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Those confessions were pretty intense. Is that scripted, or are people really sharing their actual secrets? Diane laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Oh, they're real. That's the whole point. We believe that only through absolute honesty can we achieve transformation. Society forces us to hide our true selves, but here, in this isolated space, we can be authentic. She touched my arm, and her fingers were ice cold despite the warm evening. You'll understand better after the midnight performance. It's the centerpiece of our work, the moment when witness becomes participant, when the observer can no longer remain separate from the observed. That confirmed what I'd been suspecting. They didn't just want me to photograph their art project. They wanted me involved in whatever this actually was. I mumbled something about needing to check my equipment and headed toward my van, feeling multiple sets of eyes watching me. Inside my van with the doors locked, I pulled out my phone. No service, of course. I'd lost signal about 40 miles back. I had a satellite emergency beacon, the kind hikers carry, but was this an emergency yet? These people were weird and unsettling, but they hadn't actually threatened me. Maybe I was overreacting, letting my imagination run wild in this creepy setting. I decided to wait until after this midnight performance, see what it entailed, then make an excuse about needing to leave early in the morning. I'd forfeit the rest of the money if I had to. I was editing photos on my laptop when someone knocked on my door. It was Luna, the dancer, holding a plate of food. Diane thought you might be hungry, she said through the window. Vegetarian pasta. We're all vegetarians here. I cracked the door open and took the plate, thanking her. She lingered, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You should leave, she whispered suddenly. Before midnight. Just drive away and don't look back. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away quickly, like she'd said something dangerous and didn't want to be caught. I stared at the pasta, my appetite gone. Luna's warning had made this real. Whatever was happening here wasn't just odd artistic expression. It was dangerous enough that even one of the participants was trying to warn me off. I dumped the food out my window, not trusting it hadn't been drugged or tampered with, and started my van. The engine turned over with a comforting rumble. I could leave right now, just drive back the way I came, forget the money and the weird art collective. But as I put my hand on the gear shift, I saw them gathering around my van. All 12 of them, forming a circle, standing perfectly still in the darkness. Diane was at the front, still smiling. Vincent, she called out. The performance is about to begin. We're waiting for you. It wasn't a request. It was a command. And I realized with sinking dread that they'd blocked my exit. Vehicles had been moved to create a barrier. I killed my engine and climbed out slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, even though there was nowhere to go. What's going on, Diane? Why are you blocking me in? She tilted her head, studying me like I was an interesting specimen. Because you haven't fulfilled your contract yet, Vincent. You agreed to document 3 days, and it's only been 1. We need you here for the performance. It won't work without a witness, a real witness, someone from outside our circle. The group moved closer, tightening their formation around me. I noticed they were all holding something. Candles, but the flames were strange colors, green and blue. The smoke from those candles smelled wrong, chemical and sweet. I'm leaving, I said firmly. You can keep the deposit. I'm not comfortable with this. Diane's smile vanished. I'm afraid that's not an option. You see, Vincent, this isn't just an art project. It's a ritual, and we've been preparing for months to find the right participant. Someone isolated, someone without strong connections, someone who wouldn't be missed for a few days. Carl stepped forward, and I saw he was holding something else besides a candle, a syringe. This will be easier if you cooperate, he said calmly. We're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to help you transcend, to become part of something greater. I backed away, looking for any gap in their circle, any chance to break through. But they'd positioned themselves perfectly, and beyond them was just open desert. I'd never outrun them on foot. What are you people? I demanded. Diane moved closer, and in the candlelight her face looked different, older, almost skeletal. We're seekers, Vincent. We've been practicing our art for a very long time, passing down knowledge from teacher to student. What you might call a cult, though we prefer collective consciousness experiment. Every few months, we need a new participant, someone to help us complete the ritual. The last one was a solo hiker we found 3 months ago. Before that, a geology student studying rock formations. You're just the latest in a long line. The revelation hit me like cold water. Those confessions during the truth circle, they weren't just dark secrets. They were probably real crimes, real victims, and I'd been photographing evidence of it without realizing. I thought about Luna's warning, wondered if she was actually complicit or if she was trapped here like I was about to be. The midnight performance, Diane continued, involves a ceremony where we transfer consciousness, share memories and experiences. It's quite painful, I won't lie, but those who survive say it's enlightening. And if you don't survive, well, the desert keeps its secrets. She gestured to the mirrored dome behind them. We've prepared the space. Everything is ready. You can walk there willingly, or Carl can sedate you and we'll carry you. Your choice, but either way, you're participating. The circle tightened further, and I could smell that weird chemical smoke getting stronger, making my head fuzzy. I had seconds to make a decision. Fight, run, or comply and hope for a chance to escape later. I chose violence. I grabbed the nearest candle holder from the person next to me and swung it hard, connecting with someone's face. They screamed and went down, and I used that moment of chaos to shove through the gap in the circle. I ran toward the metal sculptures, hoping to use them as obstacles between me and the group. Behind me, I heard Diane shouting orders, her calm demeanor finally cracking. Don't let him reach the perimeter. He knows too much. My boots pounded across the hard-packed desert floor as I weaved between the art installations. The dollhead spiral loomed up on my right, and I grabbed it, pulling it over. The structure crashed down, scattering hundreds of heads across the ground. I heard someone trip and fall, buying me precious seconds. But there were 12 of them and one of me, and they knew this terrain better. I could hear them fanning out, cutting off escape routes, communicating with whistles and calls that sounded almost like bird songs. I ducked behind the mirror installation, trying to catch my breath and think. My van keys were in my pocket, but getting back to the van meant crossing open ground where they'd see me. The other vehicles were all locked, I checked earlier. My only real option was to disappear into the desert and hope I could survive long enough to reach the dirt road or flag down help. But it was pitch black out there beyond the camp's perimeter, no moon, and the desert at night was full of dangers, rattlesnakes, scorpions, cliffs I might not see until I fell over them. Still, better than whatever they had planned for that dome. I heard footsteps approaching and pressed myself flat against the back of the mirror structure. Raj appeared around the corner, holding a flashlight and that syringe Carl had been carrying. Vincent, this is foolish, he called out. You'll die out there in the dark. We're offering you something incredible, a chance to be part of something eternal. Our consciousness will merge with yours. You'll never truly die. I stayed silent, watching him sweep the area with his flashlight. He moved past my hiding spot, and I carefully circled around the other side of the installation. That's when I saw Luna standing alone near one of the fabric structures, holding a flashlight, but not searching, just standing there, watching. Our eyes met, and she jerked her head toward the east, away from where the others were looking. She was showing me an escape route. I didn't know if I could trust her, if this was a trap, but she'd warned me before. I made my decision and ran in the direction she'd indicated, keeping low. The fabric structure she'd been standing near had an opening, and I slipped through it. Inside was a small space with supplies, water bottles, energy bars, a first aid kit, and a set of car keys with a tag that said bus. Luna had prepared an escape kit. She'd been planning this, maybe waiting for the right moment or the right person to help. The school bus was parked on the eastern edge of camp, furthest from my van. If I could reach it, start it up before they realized what was happening, I might actually get out of here. I stuffed water and food into my jacket pockets, grabbed the keys, and peered out of the fabric structure. The search had moved toward the western side of camp. They thought I'd try for my van or head toward the main dirt road. The bus was maybe 100 feet away, sitting alone in the darkness. I took a deep breath and sprinted for it, expecting any second to hear shouts or feel hands grabbing me. I reached the bus, fumbled with the keys, and yanked open the accordion door. It squeaked loudly, and I heard someone yell, "He's at the bus." I climbed into the driver's seat, shoved the key in the ignition, and turned it. Nothing. The engine clicked, but wouldn't turn over. I tried again, pumping the gas pedal. Click, click, click. The battery was dead or disconnected. Luna's escape plan was useless. I saw flashlights converging on my position and realized with sinking horror that this had been a trap after all. Luna hadn't been trying to help me. She'd been hurting me away from my van, away from my only real chance at escape. The group surrounded the bus, and Diane climbed aboard, still holding one of those strange candles. "That was exciting," she said, not even breathing hard. "Luna does this every time, plays the sympathetic one, offers false hope, drives them to desperation. It makes the ritual more powerful when the participant has fought and lost. The fear, the adrenaline, it seasons the consciousness." She sat down in the seat across from me like we were just having a casual conversation. "You're probably wondering how many people we've done this to. The answer is 43 over the past 15 years. Some we found ourselves, some we lured through ads like yours. You'd be amazed how many isolated people are desperate enough for money or meaning that they'll drive into the middle of nowhere based on a stranger's promise." Carl and Raj climbed onto the bus, grabbing my arms. I struggled, but they were stronger than they looked, their grips like iron. "The truth is, Vincent, your girlfriend was right. You were running away, and you ran right into our arms." They dragged me off the bus and across the camp toward the mirrored dome. I fought every step, but it was useless. The doors of the dome opened, revealing the interior. I'd expected something occult, pentagrams and altars, but it was worse. Clinical. There was a chair in the center with restraints, surrounded by medical equipment and monitors. For stands with bags of clear liquid. EEG machines. This wasn't some mystical ritual. It was something scientific, or trying to be. "We started as artists," Diane explained as they strapped me into the chair. "But we discovered something real 15 years ago. A way to actually transfer consciousness, share memories and experiences between minds. It requires specific conditions: isolation, fear, the right chemical cocktail, and technological interface. Most participants don't survive the process. Their minds can't handle the intrusion. But those of us who do survive, we carry pieces of all the others. 43 consciousnesses living in our 13 bodies." She touched my forehead almost tenderly. "You'll be number 44. And if you survive, you'll understand everything. You'll be one of us." They attached electrodes to my head, my chest, my arms. The cold gel they used made my skin crawl. Carl started in 4 in my left arm, and I felt liquid fire entering my veins. "That's just saline with some mild sedatives," he said, checking the monitors. "The real chemicals come later. We've refined the process over the years. The early attempts were messy. People seizing, brain damage, screaming until their vocal cords ruptured. But we've gotten better." He spoke with the pride of a craftsman discussing his work. Luna entered the dome carrying a laptop, and she avoided looking at me. I wanted to scream at her, curse her for the false hope, but my tongue felt thick and heavy. The sedatives were already working. Diane positioned herself in front of me, holding what looked like a VR headset modified with additional wiring. "This is how we interface," she explained. "The headset provides visual and auditory stimulation, specific frequencies that put your brain into a receptive state. Then we introduce our consciousness through the chemical pathway. It's like hacking a computer, really, breaking down your firewalls and uploading new data." She placed the headset over my eyes, and suddenly I was seeing things, fractal patterns, spiraling geometries, images flashing too fast to process consciously, but slow enough that my brain was catching them. Colors I didn't have names for, sounds that seemed to vibrate through my entire body. And then voices, whispers at first, growing louder. Different voices, overlapping, speaking different languages, different accents. They were memories, I realized. Fragments of the 43 people they'd done this to before me. I saw flashes of other lives. A woman hiking alone in slot canyons, a man photographing rock formations, a college student studying geology. All of them sitting in this same chair, experiencing this same horror. All of them becoming part of the collective. "Can you hear us, Vincent?" It was Diane's voice, but it sounded wrong, layered with other voices underneath, like a chorus. "We're here now, opening the doors of your mind. Don't fight it. Fighting only makes it hurt more." I tried to resist, tried to hold on to myself, my memories, my identity. But it was like trying to hold water in cupped hands. Everything was slipping away. I felt presences invading my thoughts, sorting through my memories like files in a cabinet. They saw my childhood in Boston, my relationship with my girlfriend, my failures and fears and secrets. Everything I was became exposed, violated. And they were showing me their memories in return, not voluntarily, but as a side effect of the connection. I saw Diane's real past, not the artist persona she projected. She'd been a neuroscientist at a research hospital, fired for unauthorized experiments on patients. She'd been trying to prove consciousness could be transferred, downloaded, preserved. The other members had similar histories. Carl was a former anesthesiologist stripped of his license, Raj a disgraced AI researcher. They'd found each other through dark web forums, united by obsession and lack of ethics. And they'd been doing this for longer than 15 years. More like 25, maybe 30. The 43 victims were just the recent ones. The pain was incredible, like my skull was splitting open from the inside. I heard myself screaming, distantly, like it was happening to someone else. The monitors were going crazy, my heart rate spiking, blood pressure dropping. "He's crashing," Carl shouted. Pull back, pull back." But Diane's voice was calm. "No, this is the critical moment. Either he integrates, or he dies. Either way, we learn something valuable." I felt my consciousness fragmenting, pieces of me being pulled away and distributed among them, while pieces of them flooded in. I was becoming a collection of people rather than an individual. I could feel myself dying, not physically, but mentally. The person I'd been was being erased, overwritten. In desperation, I reached for the only thing I could think of: anger. Pure, focused rage at what they were doing to me. I channeled everything into that anger, used it as an anchor to hold on to some core piece of myself. And somehow, impossibly, I pushed back. The connection that was flowing one way suddenly became two-way. If they could invade my mind, maybe I could invade theirs. I stopped resisting and instead dove deeper into the link, grabbing onto their consciousnesses and pulling. I saw everything. Every victim, every murder, every experiment. Bodies buried in the desert, people who died screaming in this chair, the slow evolution of their technique. But I also saw their fears. Diane terrified that the consciousness transfer wasn't real, that she was just a delusional murderer. Carl's growing doubt about whether what they preserved was really consciousness or just data. Raj's guilt over the first victim, a hitchhiker he'd killed 20 years ago that started this whole nightmare. They were just as fractured and broken as the people they destroyed. I pushed harder, flooding their minds with my anger, my terror, my desperate will to survive. The monitors were screaming now, not just mine but theirs. They'd all connected themselves to the system, creating a web of linked consciousness, and I was disrupting it, overloading it. Something snapped. The headset sparked and caught fire. I smelled burning plastic and hair. The whole system started shorting out, electricity arcing between equipment. The straps on my chair released. Someone must have hit an emergency button, and I tore the electrodes off my body, ripped the 4 from my arm. The others were convulsing, their own minds experiencing feedback from the disrupted connection. I stumbled out of the chair, barely able to stand, my head feeling like it was full of broken glass. Diane was on the ground, blood running from her nose and ears, making choking sounds. The others were in similar states, their consciousness transfer experiment backfiring catastrophically. Luna was the only one still standing, and she was staring at me with what looked like awe. "You broke it," she whispered. "You actually broke the connection. Nobody's ever done that before." She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the dome's exit. "We have to go now, before the system resets. They'll recover, and they'll be furious." Luna half carried, half dragged me across the camp toward my van. My legs barely worked, and my vision kept doubling. "The bus keys were fake," she gasped. "But I loosened the distributor cap on your van earlier. I can fix it in 30 seconds. I just needed you to trust me enough to run, to fight back. That anger you felt, that's what broke their control. They feed on fear and submission, but rage disrupts the neural patterns they need." We reached my van, and she popped the hood, working frantically while I leaned against the side, trying not to vomit. Behind us, I could see figures starting to emerge from the dome. They were recovering faster than Luna expected. "How long have you been with them?" I managed to ask. She didn't look up from the engine. 6 years. I was victim number 27. But the transfer didn't take completely. Part of me survived intact, separate from the collective. I've been pretending, waiting for a chance to escape, to stop them. You're the first person who's ever resisted successfully. She slammed the hood. "Try it now." I fumbled my keys out, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. The engine turned over, caught. roared to life. "Get in," I shouted to Luna, but she was already running toward the Airstream. "I need evidence. The laptop with their records, the files Marcus." She stopped, realizing her mistake. "Different Marcus," she said quickly. "They keep detailed records of everything. I can't let that data disappear." I saw Diane staggering toward us, her face a mask of blood and fury. The others were spreading out, trying to surround us again. "There's no time," I yelled. Luna looked between the Airstream and my van, torn by indecision. Then Diane raised something, a gun I hadn't known she had, and fired. The shot went wide, hitting my van's side panel with a metallic clang. That made Luna's decision for her. She sprinted back and dove into my passenger seat. "Drive. Just drive." I floored it, my van's tires spinning in the dirt before finding traction. Bullets punched through the back doors as we accelerated away from the camp. I could see the other vehicles starting up in my mirrors. They were giving chase. The dirt road was barely visible in my headlights, full of ruts and rocks that threatened to tear my suspension apart. Luna was holding onto the dashboard, her face pale. "They'll follow us all the way to the highway if they have to. They can't let us reach civilization, can't let us tell anyone what they've been doing." I pushed my van as hard as it would go, hitting 40 miles per hour on terrain that should have been taken at 15. Something in the undercarriage scraped against a rock, a horrible grinding sound, but we kept moving. Behind us, the old school bus was gaining. Someone had fixed whatever Luna had sabotaged. And beyond the bus, I could see the other vehicles forming a convoy. They were coordinated, experienced at this. How many others had tried to escape and failed? "There's a split in the road about 10 miles ahead," Luna said, pulling out her phone and using its GPS even though there was no signal. "Left goes to the main highway, right goes deeper into the desert. If we can create a distraction, make them think we went right, we might lose them." I had an idea, risky but possible. "The photos on my camera," I said. "I documented everything tonight. The confessions, the dome setup, their faces. If we can get that evidence out, even if they catch us, it might be enough." Luna nodded, understanding. "I'll upload to cloud storage if we can get signal. But we need distance first." The chase continued for miles, my van shaking apart, warning lights appearing on my dashboard. The temperature gauge was creeping into the red. I damaged something when I hit that rock. But the split was coming up. I could see it in my headlights. I made a show of slowing down at the intersection, like I was choosing which way to go, then yanked the wheel right toward the deeper desert. We drove for maybe half a mile. Then I killed my lights and engine, coasting to a stop behind a large outcropping of rock. "What are you doing?" Luna whispered. "Hiding. They'll follow our tracks this way, but in the dark they might miss us if we're completely dark and silent." We sat in the darkness, barely breathing, and watched the convoy approach the split. The bus turned right, following our tracks, and the other vehicles followed. Their lights swept past our hiding spot, missing us by maybe 50 feet. We waited, counting to 300, making sure they were committed to the wrong direction. Then I started my van as quietly as possible and crept back to the intersection with just my parking lights on. I turned left toward the highway, gradually increasing speed. Behind us, I could see the convoy's lights disappearing deeper into the desert. We'd bought ourselves maybe 20 minutes before they realized their mistake. The road to the highway took an hour that felt like a year. My van was dying, steam pouring from under the hood, horrible noises from the engine, but it kept going through sheer stubbornness. Luna was uploading files from my camera to every cloud service she could think of, narrating what she was doing. Police cloud backup, FBI tip line, journalist contacts, my sister's email, everywhere. Even if they catch us, this evidence exists now. When we finally hit the paved highway, I nearly cried with relief. We turned toward Tonopah, pushing the dying van as hard as it would go. 5 miles later, we saw the most beautiful sight in the world, a Nevada Highway Patrol car parked at a rest stop. I pulled in, honking my horn, and the officer jumped out, hand on his weapon. "Help us," I croaked. "There's a cult in the desert. They tried to kill us. They've murdered dozens of people." The officer looked skeptical until he saw the bullet holes in my van, the blood on Luna's clothes, our terrified expressions. He called for backup immediately. The raid happened 3 days later. FBI, state police, ATF, a whole alphabet soup of agencies. They found the camp exactly where we said it would be, but the desert disciples were gone. Vanished like they'd never existed, taking all their equipment with them. But they left evidence behind, buried evidence, 17 bodies in shallow graves, matching missing persons reports going back 8 years. Luna's testimony and my photos were enough to launch a nationwide manhunt. 6 months later, they're still looking. Diane, Carl, Raj, and the others have disappeared completely, probably scattered across the country, maybe even continuing their experiments somewhere new. Luna and I both went through months of neurological testing. The doctors said we were lucky. The interrupted consciousness transfer left some damage, persistent headaches and memory issues, but nothing permanent. Though sometimes, late at night, I hear those other voices in my head, whispers from the 43 people who didn't escape. And I wonder if maybe their transfer did work, partially, and I'm carrying pieces of them with me. Luna says she hears them too. We stay in contact, 2 survivors trying to live with what we experienced. The FBI tells us the investigation is ongoing, but I know the truth. The Desert Disciples are still out there, still searching for isolated victims, still trying to perfect their horrifying science. And every van life ad I see, every invitation to remote locations, makes me wonder if they're hunting again. Sometimes I think about going back out there, into that desert, trying to find them before they find someone else. But then I remember that chair, that pain, that feeling of myself being erased, and I know I'll never be that brave. Or that stupid. The desert keeps its secrets, and some of them are still hungry. My name is Derek Hollis. I'm 43 years old, and I live in Sacramento, California. I've been doing the van life thing for about 2 years now, quit my job as an insurance adjuster, sold most of my stuff, and bought a 2015 Ford Transit that I converted myself. My girlfriend Iris, she's 38, joined me about 8 months ago. We met at a rest stop in Arizona, both of us living out of our vehicles, and just clicked. She's got this old Chevy van from the 90s that's somehow still running. We've been traveling together ever since, sometimes parking side by side, sometimes caravanning to the next spot. So we're heading into Nevada, middle of October, and Iris gets this idea about Goldfield. She'd been reading about it online. One of those ghost towns that used to be a booming mining city back in the early 1900s. At its peak, like 20,000 people lived there. Now, maybe 200 souls, if that. Most of the old buildings are still standing though, just empty and rotting under the desert sun. She was all excited about getting some cool footage for her YouTube channel. I wasn't thrilled about it, honestly. Something about abandoned places in the middle of nowhere always felt off to me, you know? But Iris had that look in her eyes, that stubborn excitement, and I knew I wasn't going to talk her out of it. We've been arguing a lot lately anyway, stupid stuff, mostly about money and where we were headed next, so I figured why not? Pick your battles, right? The drive from Tonopah took about an hour, straight down Highway 95. The landscape out there is just brutal, flat stretches of nothing. Then suddenly these jagged mountains rising up like broken teeth. Desert scrub everywhere, that pale sandy dirt that looks almost white in the afternoon sun. We passed maybe 3 other vehicles the whole way. When we rolled into Goldfield around 4 p.m., the sun was already starting to sink, casting these long shadows across the main street. And I'm telling you, the place looked like something out of a horror movie. The old Goldfield Hotel loomed over everything. This massive 4-story building with most of its windows busted out, dark holes staring down at us. There were other structures too, wooden buildings barely standing, leaning at weird angles like they might collapse any second. We parked our vans on the outskirts, near what used to be some kind of industrial area. There were these old mining structures, rusted metal frames and collapsed shafts with warning signs that had faded so much you could barely read them. Iris immediately jumped out with her camera, already talking about getting B-roll before the light died. I got out slower, stretching my legs, and that's when I noticed how quiet it was. I mean dead quiet. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just this heavy silence that pressed down on everything. The air smelled strange too, metallic and dusty, with something else underneath I couldn't quite place. Something that reminded me of the way old basements smell, damp and rotten. I looked around at the scattered buildings, the empty streets, and felt this uncomfortable prickle at the back of my neck. This place gives me the creeps, I called over to Iris. She was already walking toward the main street, camera up, filming everything. Yeah, that's the point, she yelled back, laughing. It's supposed to be haunted. The hotel especially. There's this legend about a woman named Elizabeth who was murdered there in the 1900s. People say they still see her in the windows. I shook my head and grabbed some water from my van. The temperature was dropping fast. That's the thing about the desert. It goes from hot to cold in like an hour once the sun starts going down. I pulled on a jacket and followed Iris, keeping my distance while she did her thing. She was walking between buildings, filming, talking into her camera about the history of the place. I hung back, hands in my pockets, watching the shadows stretch longer and longer across the dusty ground. That's when I saw the guy. He was standing maybe 50 yards away, next to one of those half-collapsed wooden structures. Just standing there, perfectly still, watching us. He was tall, wearing dark clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. I couldn't make out any details, but something about the way he stood there, so motionless, not moving at all, made my stomach tighten. "Iris," I said, but she was too far ahead, still filming. I looked back at the guy, and I swear he was closer now. Not walking, just closer. Like he'd teleported forward while I'd glanced away. My heart started beating faster. "Iris," I called louder this time. She turned around, annoyed. "What?" I pointed toward where the guy had been standing, but when I looked back, he was gone. Just empty space and shadows. "There was someone there," I said, but even as the words came out, they sounded stupid. Iris rolled her eyes. "Derek, there's probably a few people who actually live here. Relax." But I couldn't relax. Something felt wrong, really wrong, and it was only getting worse as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. We decided to stay the night right there in Goldfield, even though every instinct I had was screaming at us to leave. Iris wanted to do some night filming at the hotel, said the darkness would make everything look more atmospheric for her viewers. I tried to talk her out of it, but she accused me of being paranoid and boring, and honestly, I was too tired to fight about it. We drove our vans closer to the main street and parked them side by side in front of what used to be a general store. The building was barely standing, its front windows shattered and the door hanging off its hinges. As we set up for the night, I kept looking around, scanning the empty streets and dark windows of the surrounding buildings. That guy I'd seen earlier, or thought I'd seen, was still bothering me. The way he'd just vanished didn't sit right. Around 8 p.m., Iris grabbed her camera and a flashlight and announced she was heading to the hotel. "I'm going with you," I said immediately. No way was I letting her wander around this creepy-ass town alone in the dark. She smiled like she'd won something and said, "I knew you'd come around." We walked down the main street together, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The beam of light would catch things: broken glass, rusted metal, a rocking chair on a porch still moving slightly even though there was no wind. That metallic smell from earlier was stronger now, mixed with something else, something that made me think of meat left out too long in the sun. The Goldfield Hotel loomed ahead of us, this massive dark shape blocking out the stars. Most people don't realize how big these old mining town hotels were. This thing had to be at least 150 feet tall, with elaborate stonework and these columns out front that were crumbling and covered in graffiti. We stepped through the main entrance. The doors were long gone, and into the lobby. Our flashlights swept across the interior, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it looked like something from a nightmare. The floor was covered in debris, broken furniture, shattered bottles, and what might have been animal bones. The walls were peeling, exposing old wallpaper underneath with these creepy floral patterns. A grand staircase rose up into darkness, its railing broken in places, and I could see doors lining the hallways on the upper floors, most of them hanging open like mouths. "This is perfect," Iris whispered, already filming. I stayed close to her, my flashlight moving constantly, checking corners and doorways. Every shadow seemed to move, seemed alive. Then we heard it, a sound from upstairs. A dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across a wooden floor. We both froze. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Iris nodded, her camera still recording. "Could be an animal," she said, but her voice was shaky. "Or the wind." "There is no wind," I said. The dragging sound came again, louder this time, more deliberate. It was coming from the second floor, directly above us. Then we heard footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps walking across the floor upstairs. My whole body went cold. "We need to leave," I said, grabbing Iris's arm. but she pulled away from me, actually moving toward the staircase. "Are you insane?" I hissed. "This is exactly what my viewers want to see," she said. "Real paranormal activity. This could go viral." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The footsteps upstairs had stopped, and now there was just silence, that same heavy, oppressive silence from earlier. Then a door slammed somewhere on the second floor, the sound echoing through the entire building. That's when I saw him again, the guy from earlier. He was standing at the top of the stairs, his figure barely visible in the darkness. That wide-brimmed hat, those dark clothes. He wasn't moving, just standing there, and even though I couldn't see his face, I knew he was looking right at us. "Iris, we need to go right now," I said, my voice barely working. She turned her camera toward the stairs, toward where the figure was standing, and I heard her gasp. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Do you see that?" The figure started moving down the stairs, one step at a time, and there was something wrong with the way he moved. It was too smooth, too fluid, like he was gliding rather than walking. We backed toward the entrance, neither of us able to look away. When he was about halfway down the stairs, he stopped, and then he spoke. His voice was raspy, like gravel scraping against metal, and it seemed to come from everywhere at once, not just from where he was standing. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This place belongs to the dead." Iris's camera fell from her hands and hit the floor with a crack. We both turned and ran, sprinting out of that hotel and back down the main street toward our vans. I could hear footsteps behind us, but when I risked a glance back, there was nothing there, just empty darkness. We reached our vans gasping for air, and I immediately jumped into mine, started the engine. Iris was doing the same in hers. Through my rearview mirror, I could see the hotel in the distance, and there were lights in some of the windows now. Not electric lights. These were flickering, like candles or oil lamps. And there were shapes moving behind those windows, dark silhouettes that seemed to be watching us. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the steering wheel. Iris was on her CB radio, her voice panicked. "Derek, did you see those lights? What the hell is happening?" Before I could answer, something slammed into the side of my van, hard enough to rock the whole vehicle. I screamed, swinging my flashlight toward the sound, but there was nothing there. Then it happened again, on the other side, like something was circling my van and hitting it. Iris was yelling now, saying something was happening to her van too. I looked over and saw her van shaking, like multiple hands were pushing and pulling at it from all sides. The metallic smell was overwhelming now, filling my van, making me gag. And then everything stopped. The shaking, the hitting, everything. Just silence again. But now I could see them, figures standing in a circle around both our vans. Maybe 10 or 12 of them, all wearing dark clothes, all perfectly still. And every single one of them was staring at us. I don't know how long we sat there, frozen in our vans, staring at those figures surrounding us. It felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. These couldn't be real people, right? Real people don't just appear out of nowhere and stand perfectly still like statues in the middle of the night. But they looked real. I could see details now that my eyes had adjusted. Worn clothing, faces hidden in shadow under hats and hoods, but definitely human-shaped. One of them, the closest to my driver's side window, tilted its head slowly, studying me like I was some kind of specimen. That's when I noticed its eyes, or where its eyes should have been. Just dark hollows, empty sockets that seemed to go on forever. I felt my bladder almost let go. This wasn't just scary anymore. This was something else entirely, something disturbing on a level I couldn't process. The CB radio crackled to life with Iris's voice, high-pitched and terrified. "Derek, what do we do? What the fuck do we do?" I grabbed the radio, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped it. "We drive," I said. "On 3, we both gun it straight ahead. Don't stop for anything." I could hear her breathing heavily through the speaker. "There's too many of them. We'll hit them." "I don't think they're real," I said, though I didn't believe my own words. "Just go on 3. 1, 2, 3. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, and my van lurched forward. I braced for impact, certain I was about to plow through these things, but the van passed right through them, like they weren't even there, like driving through smoke. In my rearview mirror, I saw Iris's van do the same thing, the figures offering no resistance whatsoever. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice. As we passed through them, I felt this overwhelming cold, This bone-deep chill that went straight through me even though my heater was blasting. And I heard whispers, dozens of voices all talking at once, saying things I couldn't quite make out, but that filled me with this crushing sense of dread. We drove for maybe 5 minutes, getting as far from that main street as we could while still being in Goldfield's limits. I didn't want to risk the open highway in the dark with whatever the hell was happening. We ended up parking near some old mining equipment on the far side of town. These huge rusted machines that probably hadn't moved in a century. I got out of my van and ran to Iris's, yanking her door open. She practically fell into my arms, sobbing. "Did you see them? Did you see their faces?" she kept saying over and over. I held her tight, looking around constantly, expecting those figures to appear again at any moment. "We're leaving at first light," I said. "We'll drive straight to Tonopah, find a motel, and forget this place ever existed." She nodded against my chest, but then she pulled back, her eyes wide. "My camera. I left my camera in the hotel when I dropped it. All my footage. Forget the camera," I said immediately. "We're not going back there." But of course, things couldn't be that simple. Around midnight, I was in my van trying to sleep, though sleep seemed impossible, when I heard a tapping on my window. Soft at first, then more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, heart hammering, and looked out. Nothing. Just darkness and the shapes of the mining equipment casting weird shadows in the moonlight. Then the tapping came from the back window. Tap, tap, tap. I grabbed my flashlight and spun around, shining it through the back windows. Still nothing. The tapping started again, this time on the roof. Tap, 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 tap. All over the roof now, like dozens of fingers drumming against the metal. I looked over at Iris's van and saw it was shaking slightly. She was experiencing the same thing. The CB radio crackled. "Derek, they're back. They're all around my van. I can see their shadows." I looked out my windows again, and she was right. Silhouettes surrounded both vehicles, more than before. Maybe 20 or 30 of them now, all standing there in that same unsettling stillness. But they weren't doing anything, just standing and watching. Then one of them moved. The figure closest to my driver's door stepped forward, and I got my first clear look at a face. It was a man, or had been a man once. His skin was gray and papery, stretched tight over his skull like leather. His eyes were those same dark hollows I'd seen before, but now I could see something moving inside them, something that writhed and squirmed. His mouth opened, and I saw teeth, too many teeth, all jagged and sharp. When he spoke, his jaw didn't move right, like it was broken or dislocated. "You took something that doesn't belong to you," he said in that same gravelly voice from the hotel. I shook my head, confused and terrified. "I didn't take anything. The woman took something," he said, and all the figures turned to look at Iris's van. "She must return it, or she stays here. With us. Forever." My mind raced. What could Iris have taken? Then it hit me. When we were in the hotel lobby, I'd seen her pick something up off the floor. A small object, she'd shoved it in her pocket without thinking. I'd assumed it was just a rock or piece of debris for a souvenir. I grabbed the CB radio. "Iris, did you take something from the hotel? Anything at all?" There was a pause. Then her voice came through, small and frightened. Just this old coin I found on the floor. It looked interesting." "Derek, how did you?" "You need to throw it out right now," I said. "These things want it back." I watched as her door opened slightly, and her hand appeared holding something small. She tossed it onto the ground, and the coin, if that's what it was, landed in the dirt with a soft clink. For a moment, nothing happened. The figures remained motionless, surrounding us. Then, one by one, they turned and began walking away, disappearing into the darkness between the buildings. Within a minute, they were all gone. But the man with the gray skin, the one who'd spoken to me, he stayed. He bent down slowly, picked up the coin, and examined it in his palm. Then he looked directly at me through my window, and I saw his mouth stretch into this horrible smile, showing all those sharp teeth. "We'll remember you," he said. "When you die, you'll come back here. Everyone who enters Goldfield leaves a piece of themselves behind, and we collect the pieces." Then he vanished, just blinked out of existence like he'd never been there at all. We didn't sleep at all that night. How could we? I sat in my van with every light on, my eyes darting to the windows every few seconds, expecting to see those gray faces pressed against the glass. Iris stayed on the CB radio with me most of the night, and we just talked about nothing, Childhood memories, stupid TV shows we used to watch, anything to keep our minds off what had just happened. But every conversation would eventually trail off into silence. And in that silence, all I could hear was that thing's voice echoing in my head. "We'll remember you. When you die, you'll come back here." The words felt like a curse, like something that had burrowed into my brain and wouldn't let go. Around 4 a.m., I noticed something weird. The mining equipment outside, those massive rusted machines, they looked different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then I realized some of them had moved. Not much, just slightly, like someone had pushed them a few feet. But these things had to weigh tons. There was no way they'd moved on their own. As soon as the first lights started creeping over the mountains, turning the sky from black to deep purple, I started my engine. "We're leaving right now," I told Iris over the radio. "Don't even wait for full daylight. We're going." She didn't argue. We pulled out onto the main road, and I kept my foot heavy on the gas, eager to put distance between us and Goldfield. But as we drove through the town toward Highway 95, something felt off. The streets looked different in the early morning light. Buildings that I swore weren't there before now stood along the main street. And they didn't look abandoned, they looked lived in. I could see curtains and windows, fresh paint on some of the doors, even a sign hanging outside what looked like a saloon that was swaying slightly in the morning breeze. "Derek, are you seeing this?" Iris's voice came through the radio. "The town looks different." I was seeing it, but I didn't want to believe it. It was like Goldfield had transformed overnight, like we'd driven into some version of the town from 100 years ago. Then I saw people. Actual people walking on the wooden sidewalks, going about their business. Men in old-fashioned suits and hats, women in long dresses. A kid ran across the street chasing a hoop with a stick, something I'd only seen in old photographs. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of hallucination brought on by lack of sleep and fear. But Iris was seeing it too, which meant either we were both losing our minds, or something impossible was happening. One of the men on the sidewalk turned to look at us as we drove past, and his face. Jesus Christ, his face was wrong. It was that same gray papery skin, those same hollow eyes. He smiled at me with too many teeth, and then he tipped his hat like we were old friends. I pressed harder on the gas, my van picking up speed. We needed to get out of here, needed to reach the highway and leave this nightmare behind. But the town seemed to stretch on forever. We drove and drove, passing more buildings, more of those gray-faced people who would stop and stare at us with those empty eyes. The Hotel Goldfield appeared again on our right, but this time it looked pristine. No broken windows, no crumbling stonework. It looked exactly like it probably did in its heyday, and standing on the balcony on the 4th floor was a woman in a white dress. Even from a distance, I could tell something was wrong with her. She was too still, and there was something dark spreading across the front of her dress. Blood, I realized. The woman from the legend. Elizabeth. She raised one hand and pointed at us, and I heard this sound, like a scream, but coming from everywhere at once, from the buildings and the ground and the very air around us. I swerved, nearly losing control of my van, and when I looked in my rearview mirror, the woman was gone and the hotel was back to its abandoned state, rotting and broken. "Derek, I can't see the highway." Iris's panicked voice crackled through the radio. "It should be right here, but I can't see it." She was right. We'd driven far enough that we should have reached the edge of town and hit Highway 95, but instead, we were still surrounded by buildings. It was like Goldfield had grown, expanded, trapping us inside its boundaries. I made a quick decision and took a hard right, heading down a side street I didn't remember seeing before. The street was narrow, flanked by tall buildings on both sides that blocked out most of the early morning light. Our vans barely fit, and I could hear my side mirrors scraping against the wooden walls. The street seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, and with each turn, I expected to see those figures again, blocking our path. Then suddenly, we burst out into open desert. Just like that, we were free of the town, racing across the flat scrubland with nothing but sagebrush and rocks around us. I looked in my rearview mirror and saw Goldfield behind us, looking small and distant, just a cluster of buildings on the horizon. But it looked wrong, like the perspective was off, like it was both very far away and impossibly close at the same time. We drove for another 20 minutes before I finally felt safe enough to slow down. My whole body was shaking, my shirt soaked with sweat despite the cold morning air. When I saw a wide spot on the side of the road, I pulled over, and Iris pulled up beside me. We both got out, and she collapsed against me, her whole body trembling. "What the fuck was that?" she kept saying. "What the fuck was that?" I had no answer. We stood there in the desert, holding each other, watching the sun rise over the mountains. Goldfield was still visible in the distance, but it looked normal now, just an abandoned mining town baking under the Nevada sun. Like nothing had happened. Like the whole night had been some shared delusion. But I knew better. Something had happened to us back there, something that had marked us somehow. I could still feel it, that cold presence, that sense of being watched. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that those things had been telling the truth. A part of us was still back there, and eventually, one way or another, we'd have to return. We made it to Tonopah by 8 a.m., pulled into the first motel we saw, and got a room. Neither of us wanted to be alone, and honestly, the vans felt contaminated somehow, like they'd absorbed some of that darkness from Goldfield. We showered, changed clothes, and sat on the edge of the motel bed in silence for a long time. Iris kept checking her phone, scrolling through the footage she'd managed to save before dropping her camera. Most of it was corrupted, just static and distorted audio, but there were a few frames that showed things. Shadows that shouldn't have been there, faces and windows that appeared for just a single frame. "We should delete all of this," I said. She looked at me like I was crazy. "Are you kidding? This is proof. This is real evidence of something paranormal." "Exactly," I said. "And if we post it, if we tell people what happened, they'll think we're insane. Or worse, other people will go looking for it. You want that on your conscience?" She stared at the phone screen for another minute, then slowly nodded and deleted everything. We spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, trying to convince ourselves that we could just move on from what happened. We got food at a diner. I couldn't eat more than a few bites, and walked around Tonopah, which is also a mining town, but one that still has actual living people in it. Every shadow made me jump. Every stranger who looked at me made my heart race. By evening, I knew we needed to talk about what came next. "I think we should go our separate ways for a while," Iris said before I could bring it up. She was sitting on the motel bed, hugging her knees to her chest. "I love you, Derek, but I can't do this anymore. The van life thing, being on the road constantly. After last night." She trailed off, and I understood. The experience had broken something in both of us, had shattered whatever romanticized idea we'd had about freedom and adventure. That night, alone in the motel room after Iris had gone back to her van, I had the first dream. I was standing in Goldfield again, on the main street, but it was daytime and the town was alive. Not with those gray-faced things, but with real people from the 1900s, going about their daily business. I walked into the Goldfield Hotel, and it was beautiful inside. Polished wood, elegant furniture, crystal chandeliers. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, and there was a door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar. I knew I shouldn't go in, but in the dream, I couldn't stop myself. Inside the room was Elizabeth, the woman in the white dress, sitting in a chair by the window. She turned to look at me, and her face was pale and sad. "They killed me here," she said, "and now I can't leave. None of us can leave." Behind her, I could see out the window, and Goldfield stretched on forever. Thousands of buildings, millions of gray-faced people walking the streets. "This is what it really is," she said. "This is what's waiting. A city of the dead, growing larger every year. Every person who dies with a connection to this place, they come back. They add to it." I woke up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. It was 3 a.m. I grabbed my phone and called Iris, and she answered on the first ring. "You had the dream too," she said. It wasn't a question. We talked until sunrise, comparing what we'd seen, and it was identical. The same walk through town, the same conversation with Elizabeth, the same horrifying view of Goldfield transformed into an endless city of the dead. "We need to do something," Iris said. "We can't just ignore this." But what could we do? We were just two people who'd stumbled into something way beyond our understanding. Over the next few days, we did research. Real research, digging into the history of Goldfield. And we found things, disappearances, unexplained deaths, stories of people who'd visited the town and later claimed they couldn't stop dreaming about it. There was a forum online, just a few dozen people, all sharing similar experiences. They called themselves the Marked Ones. People who'd been to Goldfield and couldn't escape it, even after they'd left. One guy on the forum, username Desert Wanderer 83, had been dealing with it for 15 years. He'd posted his story about visiting Goldfield in 2010 and encountering the gray-faced figures. Since then, he'd been having the dreams every single night. He'd tried everything: therapy, medication, even reaching out to paranormal investigators. Nothing worked. His last post was from 3 months ago. I can feel it pulling me back. It's like there's a rope tied around my soul, and it's getting tighter. I know I'm going to end up there eventually. Maybe I should just go now and get it over with. After that, nothing. No more posts. Iris tracked down his real name through some internet sleuthing. Marcus Brennan lived in Phoenix. She found his obituary. He died 2 months ago. Car accident on Highway 95, just outside of Goldfield. His car had swerved off the road for no apparent reason, rolled multiple times. He was 47 years old. The funeral had been in Phoenix, but there was a note in the obituary that made my blood run cold. At his request, Marcus's ashes were scattered in Goldfield, Nevada, the town he loved. Loved. The word felt wrong, felt like a lie. He hadn't loved Goldfield. Goldfield had claimed him, had been pulling him back all those years until finally, it got what it wanted. Iris and I sat in that motel room, staring at Marcus's obituary on her phone, and we both understood what our future looked like. We'd have the dreams forever. We'd feel that pull, that calling, getting stronger and stronger until we couldn't resist anymore. And when we died, whether it was tomorrow or 50 years from now, our souls would go back there. We'd become like those gray-faced things, standing in the streets, waiting for the next visitors to mark. There has to be a way to break it, Iris said, but her voice was hollow, defeated. I wanted to believe her, wanted to think we could find some solution, some way to sever the connection. But deep down, I knew the truth. That man with the gray skin had been right. We'd left a piece of ourselves in Goldfield, and eventually, Goldfield would collect the rest. We packed up and left Tonopah the next morning, heading in opposite directions. Iris went south toward Las Vegas, said she needed to see her family. I drove west, back toward California, but I didn't make it home. I'm writing this from a motel in Hawthorne, Nevada, about 130 miles north of where it all started. I've been having the dream every night now. And last night, I woke up to find desert sand on my motel room floor, even though I know I locked the door and didn't go outside. The sand formed a trail from the door to my bed, like something had walked in and stood over me while I slept. I tried calling Iris this morning, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I called 5 more times. Nothing. I'm terrified that she went back. Or worse, that something came and got her. Tomorrow, I'm going to drive back to Goldfield. Not because I want to, but because I have to. Because I can feel it now, that rope around my soul that Marcus talked about. It's pulling me back, and I don't think I can fight it anymore. Maybe I'll find answers there. Maybe I'll find Iris. Or maybe I'll just become another gray face in the crowd, another ghost adding to that endless city of the dead. If you're reading this and you're thinking about visiting Goldfield, don't. Just don't. Some places aren't meant to be disturbed. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. And some debts can never be paid. I'm leaving this account on the forum for the marked ones. If I don't post again in a week, you'll know what happened. And if you ever drive through rural Nevada and see me standing by the side of the road in Goldfield, don't stop. Just keep driving. Because I won't be me anymore. I'll be one of them, waiting for the next person to mark, the next soul to add to the collection. God help me, I'm going back.